What is up, podheads? Back with another episode of the Podio Slave podcast. My name is Tony, joined as always by Anthony.
What's happening, everyone? I am here as always every single week, except for two, but
not many. Yeah, you haven't missed much.
Yeah, we won't call those out. I've been here for all of them. Let's just say that.
Yeah, and we're back with another episode, another nerdery, another cool conversation that we didn't see coming, that kind of hit us out of left field. And we were able to pull together at the last minute and make happen. And super stoked to be able to do that every week. And sometimes you get people that you've been hoping to get for a while and it wasn't planned. Like, you asked and time went by and you kind of moved on to other things. And then bam, they're like, yeah, I'll do it. I'm like, oh, okay, let's go.
Yeah, I have availability. I'm back from tour. I'm about to head out on tour again, coming and going. And we've said this a million times. That's half the fun with this. It's what's lurking around the corner. It's you never know when we have enough bait in the water out there that I don't know, something from 2 years ago could come back.
And it's happened. That's happened before.
And part of that is, we just make it work. So you'll notice I didn't use my original mic that I use every week. So if I sound a little different, that's why. But hey, the show goes on. This is DIY. This is what we do. We make it happen. It's us. It's what we want to do when we want to do it, and sometimes it's how we want to do it, and sometimes it isn't.
How can we pull this off? Let's pull this. Let's make sure we pull this off. And being able to talk the last couple of weeks. If you're here from any of those episodes, with Josh Cabello Trusco, which did really well, I was super stoked with how many people checked that one out, and then obviously our marathon melancholy session with Spose last week. We appreciate you checking us out. If this is your first time and you're here because we have Jay Weinberg, like, thank you, first of all. And this is what we do every week. And if you're an old head, we appreciate you too. I know Bob's out there listening. I know Seth's out there listening every week. So we appreciate you guys just as much.
Yeah, thanks for coming back. And hopefully you feel the same way when Monday or Sunday at midnight hits and you get that new episode. Hopefully this one was a pleasant surprise. But yeah, Jay, I got to tell you, phenomenal conversation. We hit on a lot. We hit on his come up. I mean, his story is well chronicled, so we didn't do the soup to nuts, story, but we hit on some really cool stuff. His first time playing with Bruce, what he learned from that, joining Suicidal Tendencies in the last year or two, the Metallica tour that he's on, like between gigs. That dude could do anything in the world, but he's hanging out with us. And we certainly appreciate that. What else do we have?
What it's like playing small rooms versus the massive stage that is a Metallica tour, and maybe doing that in the same week, right? Because sometimes the way that tour is set up, and Jay will explain it, they're not playing every day. So maybe they have to get in the car and drive to the next, wherever the next show is that they're playing with Suicidal, and maybe you play a couple shows in between. So going from playing the tiny room to the big room in the same week, that's kind of wild.
That's right. We do hit on how Suicidal recently played the Black and Blue Bowl and then the Metallica stuff. And that's a band, and I think we maybe say this in the episode, that's a band that their range is insane. Like they can play with a Metallica one week and an E-Town the next. It's amazing.
Yeah. And then he's got some stuff he's working on. I know he hinted at some projects with us towards the back half of the episode. Really cool stuff that I'm excited to hear myself. Like I can't wait to see what Jay's got cooked up here. So with different folks, and I think you'll be excited to hear about it too when we talk about it here coming up.
So let's get into it. We're here for Jay. You're here for Jay. Let's all listen together. Thanks, everyone. Jay Weinberg is in the building, not physically but remotely here. Jay, thanks for coming on with us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And this is, I love like the timing of this because you're just coming back from gigs and you're about to head out on gigs in like 2 days. And I'm not a musician and I don't tour a lot, I don't travel a lot, but I don't think I'd want to like hang out and talk with people between gigs. So thank you.
My pleasure. Well, that's what we do, right? The tour we're on right now, being out with Metallica, I'm playing with Suicidal Tendencies. The nature of it is that it's like a show every like 5 to 7 days. It's been pretty fascinating to be a part of. But the schedule is such that it's like, you kind of like play a show, bop home to, feed the dogs, do some laundry, go back out, play another show. I love it. Kind of the nature of it, which has been, amazing. It's kind of a different sort of pacing for touring than I'm used to, but it's been quite an experience. But no, I'm happy to join with you guys.
Have you ever done anything like that before, or is this the first time?
Not really. I mean, sometimes there are like instances, like maybe say in the States, where there are like several festivals happening at the same time or like around the same time. You might like go out and play one, come home, have the week at home, go out, play another. I mean, I live in Nashville, so a lot of people in our community here do the weekend warrior kind of thing, where it's a lot of country artists go out and play on the weekends, and then they come home and they have their family time at home, and they'll do that for like months on end. That's like kind of what people around here are sort of used to. In the metal and punk and hardcore kind of context, it's a little bit different. We're more used to just like hitting the road and stringing together many shows in a row and stuff. So this is a little bit of like a hybrid of that, and it's by Metallica's design. It's very interesting where this tour that they're doing is kind of incredible as just a fan. For myself, it's like I get to watch my favorite band like 30 times this year.
Are they your favorite, like your single favorite band?
I mean, I very much struggle with like having a favorite band, band, but certainly, one of the longest, one of the bands that's been my absolute favorite bands for the longest as I can remember it.
Love it.
It's always been a band that I think many of us around the world have always turned to, always looked to for inspiration. And the fact that they're doing what they're doing now is just like mind-boggling. And to have the proximity to it that I do now is just like watching them do what they do and how much care and love they put. I mean, I could wax poetic about this tour for a long time. But what's really cool about it, and it's a testament to their work ethic and what they're doing, is that most of these shows are 2 shows in one city. So take like Philadelphia, for example. It's 2 shows in a football field in Philadelphia. No repeat songs from Metallica. They don't play any songs from night 1 night to night 2. And both of the sets of opening bands are different. So the first night is Ice Nine Kills and Limp Bizkit, and the second night is us, Suicidal Tendencies, and Pantera supporting Metallica. So with that in mind, then like you have to logistically, figure out like, are we going home or are we playing shows to get us from one show to the next? We've done kind of a combination of both on this tour. We just got back from about like 2.5 weeks of actually like 3 weeks or something, with like a handful, maybe like 4 or 5 Metallica shows, and probably like upwards of like 10 or so headlining shows in between all those. So, you just kind of figure out it's a different way of touring. We're playing in a raucous punk club one night, and then, 10 hours later, we're setting up in a, baseball stadium, playing on it, in the round, in the middle of a baseball diamond or something. It's totally nuts, but a pretty fresh experience to be sure.
Well, it's funny. I saw you guys play the Black and Blue Bowl with E-Town at the Brooklyn Monarch. And honestly, you guys could be the only band to go from that to the Metallica gig. I mean, even the openers on the Metallica tour couldn't do that. The others, they couldn't do that.
No, totally. You were at the show, you said?
No, I wasn't. I've been to the Monarch a couple times before. I love that gig. I know they switched the stage around a couple times, but cool place.
It was cool, man. Yeah, that was my first time being at the Monarch. Growing up in New Jersey, and like I went to college in Hoboken, so I was right outside the city for like 6 years while I was completing college and touring full time at the same time. So I was in Brooklyn all the time. But like ever since I moved to Nashville about 10 years ago, like many things have changed. One of my favorite venues, St. Vitus, has closed. But I think the community up there has been fortunate to have like the Monarch, and what was a venue that I just went to? I saw my friend's Youth Code play the night before we played that Black and Blue Ball.
There's like the Meta or something.
Yeah. So great independent venues doing awesome stuff, and it was cool. Like playing the Black and Blue Ball. I hadn't played the Black and Blue Ball since I was in Madball, 15 years ago. So to have a little bit of a reunion with people from that environment was really cool. It was a pretty awesome experience just to like dip into that a little bit was a lot of fun. We had a great show, and yeah, then to bop down to Philadelphia and play, honestly one of the best shows for us of this Metallica run was the show we played in Philadelphia. So yeah, it's like different experiences every day, but like that's that keeps it exciting, that keeps it fresh.
Yeah, your creative cup is kind of runneth over, right? You get to do it all. You're not doing just the big shows. You're not doing just the little shows. You're like, all right, one day I'm going to do this, and the next day I'm going to do that, and set up for the big show, and then set up for the little show, all that stuff.
Yeah, I feel very, very fortunate in that regard. We all do.
Well, it's funny. I'm not a drummer. Like I can keep a basic beat, like da 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 da. That's it. But like I can only imagine one gig, your back is literally to the wall of the gig, and the next one, your back is to the crowd. You know, how is what's the difference? How is that?
It's very surreal, and there's no way of like preparing you for an experience like that until you actually do it. You know, and
Yeah.
few bands embark on the challenge of setting up with a 360-degree crowd around you. You know, it's a whole different ball of wax. You know, and I like, you know, I've been touring pretty much like 15 years straight, maybe a little bit longer, and I've never experienced anything like this. Like it was a complete like otherworldly experience, because yeah, you're, you know, as a drummer especially, you're used to being kind of tucked up high in the back, you know, pretty much the furthest person from the crowd in most normal situations. And now, you know, I'm playing, and not only do I not have like my bandmates anywhere near me for like, you know, you almost have like a shield of your band as like a, you know, it's all of us, and we're pushing forward from the same place. We're spread out all over this entire stage, you know? So like, and I've got a pit that's 5 feet right in front of me. I've got a pit that's 5 feet right behind me. And, you know, who knows, when we're playing, there's probably upwards of like 15, 20, 25,000 people maybe there, you know, who, something like that. And so, yeah, it's a pretty crazy environment in that you just feel, you know, incredibly exposed visually. Like you're just, there's nowhere to hide. And that's by design, you know, like when you watch Metallica, as I've been fortunate to a bunch on this tour, you know, you get to realize like how that is all by design, to be the absolute closest to the audience that you can be, where you make even the nosebleeds feel like you're right up front. And that's an incredible, you know, magic power that only some artists really possess, is to be able to make that feeling happen, you know. And I feel very lucky to have watched Metallica doing this. And, you know, I had a sense of that, like playing with Bruce in the E Street Band was definitely, that's kind of the goal, is to make a large venue feel very intimate. And that's difficult. So you do it in the ways that you can, where, you know, with Suicidal especially, you know, it's by nature for everybody in the band to be running all over the place at, you know, at one time. I'm sure if I wasn't, you know, just sitting on the drums, I'd be doing the same thing.
Oh yeah.
But that's the effort, is to, you know, break down those barriers and really make a giant place feel intimate somewhat, if you can. And so that's the challenge here. But it's just incredible, man. And even watching Metallica in the way that they like expand and contract the show, like as they've kind of designed it. You know, there's a moment where they play say the song Orion from Master of Puppets, which always, to me, I've heard them speak about it like, you know, they reference them writing Master of Puppets in a garage. You know, it's just like the four of them just jamming out in a garage and stuff. And that album has taken on a whole life of its own, and is this like larger than life thing. But then when they play Orion, it's almost like you feel like they're channeling the energy, like they're like entering that garage again. Because like when they play that song, it's usually the four of them, instrumental song. It's usually the four of them just like right around each other, just like kind of on top of each other. Even though they have a whole football stadium to explore, they're just right there. And it creates this sense of intimacy that it kind of evokes that sensation of, when you've heard them talk about these stories of, you know, writing that record in a garage and stuff, you almost like get that sense. And it's very, very cool to be able to, you know, now that I've seen it a handful of times, to be able to like understand how this tour is like created and why this stage is the way it is. And like, it's pretty fascinating. So I really, really enjoyed being around it, for sure.
Have you personally, or the band Suicidal Tendencies, have you guys taken anything from this and like maybe changed what you've done? Or did you try something new as far as like trying to make the room still feel small when it's this massive football stadium?
Yeah, I don't know if I mean, my tenure in the band, I've only been in the band for a year and a little bit more maybe, but so I don't know. I don't really have so much a reference as to like how maybe a tour like this has affected us in that way. But I think it's more so the latter of what you say of like, we've tried to just kind of bring our thing, which, usually involves, Ben jumping off of amps like he's known to do and stuff. That's a challenge when you don't have amps on stage and stuff. So you got to find other things to jump off. So, my drum set becomes mostly the launch pad for Ben Wyman, which I'm totally cool with. Growing up as a Dillinger fan, and Ben and I have been friends for a while. That's been a treat to do that and just kind of like, yeah, bring our thing there. Like I think in any situation, in this kind of, really maybe in any kind of musical situation, I think if you're invited to come along for an experience like this, you're being invited for certain reasons that might be out of your control, within your control. You don't really know, but
So true.
but
Yep.
you gotta trust your gut. Like, you gotta trust that it's like, okay, we got asked here because we're bringing something that these people want to be a part of this. So let's just bring what we bring and try to explore what that is. I will then say, like, yeah, it's definitely informed, like, oh wow, this is a whole other different thing that we're not used to, but I think that sharpens what your artistic intent. It sharpens your kind of acuity for doing this sort of stuff, and that's an amazing challenge to undertake. And I think we've played probably like 11 shows on this tour, on this Metallica tour so far, and I think we've risen to the challenge for sure.
I love that about Metallica because when you really think about it, they are one of one. How many heavy bands can fill those stadiums? One, and two, can dial it back? No one. No one can.
No, no, they
Crazy.
they are in a class of their own, obviously, and it's just an amazing thing to witness firsthand and to see, and I've watched Metallica many times over the years, and to be able to, as a fan, watch what they're doing and be like, they are on top of their game. Like, this is some of the best Metallica I've ever seen. I think they're so in tune with the audience. I think the song selection is incredible. It was really cool. The night before our first show, we had like a load-in day, so we just kind of like got our equipment in the building and could get used to, like, all right, so here's our home for the next 2.5 months. So we had a load-in day, and we got to actually, my wife and I actually got to stay late and watch Metallica rehearse, and just to kind of sit in an empty building and watch them work as hard as they do. That was amazing. And it's not like it was anything that I didn't know happen. Like, you only have that level of success and reach and influence and power if you're working on it, and to see those guys work at it was like very, very inspirational, and also just so cool to, like, we were in an empty building and there's the four guys that are Metallica, and it made it like, I've often, I think, looking at bands that have like a larger than life sort of mystique, and aura about them. I think, when I was younger, you could certainly make the case that's how I, interpreted the band Slipknot, for example. Like,
100%.
larger than life, don't know how to even approach this artistic corner of the world, this corner of the artistic world, but it's like some other planet. So then to see, those four guys just distill it to the energy between them was pretty remarkable. And to see them, rehearse stuff that I was just like, oh my God, I can't wait to see them play, Shortest Straw on this tour, which they did, and like such cool stuff. So it's like I've been definitely having like the time of my life, going back to, it's like it's like going back to school in a way, like, where I just get to, you know kind of, I get to rip a quick gig and then go to school, and just learn and have open eyes and open ears, and it's been just unbelievable, and to share it with friends too, like,
Classes in session. Jay Weinberg, are you here?
Yeah.
yeah.
Present.
Present.
I'm there every night, and I meet people in the Metallica family, this fan base that's all over, and I just get right, I'm right in the pit just because that's where I want to be, and I've had folks, kind of remark on, like, like, what are you doing here? Like, what, like, thinking that I'd be somewhere else. And I'm like, dude, I get to watch Metallica like between 20 and 30 times this year. You like, when do any of us get to do that?
That's
like,
crazy. Yeah.
yeah. So I'm very, very grateful. We all are. And it's been a tremendous blast so far.
And you've been kind of going to school, as you say, your whole life. I mean, you're the son of a very famous drummer himself, and grew up around that. Have toured with the E Street Band and Bruce, and were around Conan and all the acts that came in to the Conan show. Were you always going to be a drummer, a musician? Was that a foregone conclusion from day one?
No, it didn't feel like that. It took a little while. I think music was a slow burn for me, kind of like getting introduced to call it hand-me-downs, from my parents or my older sister, passing down, what they were into. And I'm just kind of discovering just like sound, and just like artistic, output or whatever. But, once I discovered like heavy metal and punk rock and what I would consider like the music that I was discovering for myself in my early teenage years, that's only when things started to really take shape, when I was like 13, 14 years old. Before that, I was an ice hockey player. All I wanted to do was play ice hockey. Like that was my passion. That was
nice.
What I did every day and committed myself to it. As I've gotten older, I definitely equated my love for that sport and specifically like that position in that sport to being a drummer in a band, like the sheer physicality of it, like playing hockey. My favorite sensation was getting a slap shot right to my chest and feeling that impact, because I know I had
Love it.
Happy Gilmore style.
Yeah, exactly. As a drummer, you're delivering that impact, and when I can feel the satisfaction of that heaviness, and I don't know what that is about what draws me to those things, but I think, the sensation of impact has been important to me in like anything that I do. So I think whether that was hockey or artwork or music, whatever it was, like my interests always had some sense of like impact and weight and heaviness to it. So I sought that out in the music that I was drawn to. But it only, drumming came to me, obviously, like being in a house with a father who's a drummer. I'm thankful that he never pressured me to become a musician. It was never even a conversation. And, I had a proximity to it, but like, proximity to Late Night with Conan O'Brien only makes so much sense to somebody who's 3 years old, from when I was,
right. Yeah.
a preteen. I didn't really know, because it was like, comedy that wasn't made for me. So I didn't really, I didn't have any reference for it other than my dad drives to New York every day and he plays drums and there's cameras and it's on TV, I guess. I'm watching Nickelodeon, so it's not on that.
Right.
But that's really all I knew about it. Then, of course, when I was 9, the E Street Band got back together, and I was now, I didn't even know that my dad was in a band.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it wasn't something that we discussed, like his.
I know, right? That makes sense.
Time was the TV show. So, I started putting together like, whoa, so you're like in this band and you've got these records and like all this stuff. It took me like years to kind of process the significance of that. But then when I started discovering bands that I love and their, paths, and I'm listening to Slayer records and like, wow, Slayer has records just like Bruce and the E Street Band have records. That's totally crazy. And I started to put together like the context and the historical significance and everything, and really started paying attention, and that's when I would go out for a stretch of like a couple weeks, to watch my dad play on tour. I'd be watching it no longer as like just a kid or a family member that's on the road with the band. I was like we've said, I was learning, and that was me going to school without really knowing what I was like studying for. It meant so much to me to take it all in. So then it just kind of so happened that, a couple years later, when this crazy scheduling conflict happened, where my dad had to be at what was going to be the new Tonight Show with Conan, and Bruce had a tour scheduled for the same time, he had to be in two places at once, and definitely had to be at the start of the Tonight Show at the time. So then that opened up, Bruce and my dad and Steve and John Landau, all these people wondering like, what are what are we gonna do? And it was Steve, I think, who went to bat for me. Steve Van Zandt, my uncle, my older brother in ways. Steve kind of went to bat, and he was like, I've seen this kid. I played like a bar on the Lower East Side with my high school band. And what Steve told me years and years later, he only told me this like last year, that he went to Bruce and he was like, this music is going to be like Mary Had a Little Lamb to this kid. He's like,
Wow.
I was like, my band, we were doing like Mastodon covers and stuff like that, like more complex rock music and whatever. And we're trying our best, and we're teenagers. But I think he took that as like, he has the knowledge of this music, and he's been watching us intently for years now. And like, they had a hunch that studying was not for naught. It was kind of with this hidden meaning of like, I'm taking this stuff seriously. And then when the opportunity presented itself to do this, they took a shot on someone who was completely green, totally not experienced, but really took a shot and impressed upon me that like this endeavor of playing music it's a constant learning process. It never stops. Bruce himself has not stopped progressing as a songwriter and performer, and none of those guys have stopped their progression, and I think that was a valuable lesson to learn early on from people who I think wanted to put me on a path of like, setting me up with the tools to have a life in music that is rich with artistic experiences, and not just be like well, of course it's this guy's son doing it. That wasn't really the vibe. Of course, like my relation to everybody was through my dad being his son, but the sense of family was very important in that context. It remains so today. You have Jake Clemens playing instead of his uncle Clarence. The family aspect is very real on E Street, and I'm very grateful to have had that experience. And yeah, I draw many lines directly from that experience to exactly what we're doing here. Like that experience at 17 years old playing with Bruce and the E Street Band is intimidating, and also it's intimidating getting up in a football stadium supporting Metallica with an audience 360 degrees around me. It's all just about like, I think I know it's definitely true for, say my bandmates in Suicidal Tendencies, Ben Wyman, absolute natural born performer, Mike Muir, natural born performer, Dean Pleasance, Ty Trujillo, natural born performers with killer instinct. You just take what you do and you just go out onto whatever stage. If it's in front of 5 people, if it's in front of 5 million people, you just go out with that killer instinct that you're just going to do what you're going to do. And I think that was a lesson that I learned early on with, thanks to, Bruce and the E Street Band. So I don't view many of those things and all the many things that have happened in between then and now. I really don't view any of them any different from each other. They're all tremendous learning opportunities, and the kind of through line through all of them is that it's necessary to have that that natural instinct of just driving through the moment and just doing your best.
You said so many things that I wanted to dig into, but you said you got into like punk and heavy whatever music at what, 12 or 13. So that would have put you at probably 2005. I don't want to speak for you, Tony, but like that album for me that kind of opened my whole world was Rage's Evil Empire. Super young, where it was like a secret club. I'm going from like Ace of Base and like, whatever, then to this. Who was it for you? Like what album was like, oh shit? It's like a horror movie that you shouldn't be watching. What was it for you?
Sure. Yeah. I'd say there were a few, like in my younger years, say when I was like 5 years old, the album that really switched me on, and probably thinking about it now, set me on my course of loving drums, loving wild drums with wild energy, was the Who's Quadrophenia. That album was enormous. That was the first show that I went to was in 1995. I went to see the Who play Quadrophenia at Madison Square Garden. So that was huge, but that's still categorized kind of like the hand-me-downs from my parents, really. The album that made that kind of impact for me, I believe, and it's funny, I was actually just on the phone with my friend Brandon earlier today, Brandon Steineckert, who was the founding member of the band The Used. The Used were hugely influential to me around 12 years old. You know, they had their first record came out when I was about 11 or 12. And it was watching The Used. My first show that my first like punk club show, where we're talking 2002. Smoking cigarettes is still legal in places in New York. So I'm like, I'm walking in. I was accompanied by my dad because I couldn't get in otherwise. But I'm walking into this like smoky club, and it's loud, and there's punk rockers with like dyed hair, and I'm like, whoa, this is so crazy. And here's this band playing, and I was drawn like magnetism to Brandon, the drummer. There was something about his complete abandon on the drums, and here he's got this red mohawk, and he's like going wild, and I was very much drawn to that. And I think from a sonic standpoint, I've been used to Keith Moon, and then I think as an entry level, like got into Blink-182 in the late '90s and stuff. And of course, that was hugely impactful. Like I did get to see, some of those earlier Blink tours with Travis pretty shortly after he had joined the band. And that was insanely influential as well. But it was like seeing The Used play in Irving Plaza with My Chemical Romance as support on their first record.
Isn't that an amazing bill? We saw it in Portland, Maine. It came to us.
We saw it.
So
good. Bryce and
Bryce too.
Story of the Year.
Yeah, exactly.
Insane tour. Yeah, crazy. That's a stadium tour. No.
Yeah. So nowadays, like, where would you even fit that kind of a show? It'd be insane. But so anyway, seeing that allowed me to be like, it brought it down to like just like a basic energy for me. It didn't seem now like it was this scary thing from another planet. It seemed like something that was more inviting to me than it seemed more inclusive than exclusive. And that really drew me in. And that's what made me then try to research, like, okay, I got to figure out everything about this subculture and these like subgenres of what I was getting into. And that led me down rabbit holes of finding, looking in the back of the album for like the thanks list, The Used Thanks Thursday and Alkaline Trio. Okay, I'm going to go see Thursday and Alkaline Trio play, and Thrice, like you said, and all like that was all those, very early on in my teenage years, long before I started playing drums. But it was those guys who really made me fall in love with a certain style of music and made me feel like I want to participate in some way. Watching Derek Grant in 2003, a way of drumming to punk rock music that I'd never heard before. It was dark, and that kind of spoke to like, I was definitely getting into horror movies at the time. It's funny, I actually just went to see 28 Years Later the other day, and I was remarking with some of the guys in the band, and we had a day off and we went to see the movie. And I was like, dude, I saw 28 Days Later and The Ring in like the same week when I was like 12 years old. And
The
like,
Ring is one of the goats.
Yeah.
It's so good. It's so
totally
good.
fucked me up. Like both those movies like fucked me up as a kid. But I think that also informed, because like the art that I was drawn to was like the subversive and scary at times and macabre kind of art and stuff. That still is kind of what I'm drawn to the most. So that definitely made an impression. And then, I felt it like came time when I was like 14. I was like, you know what? I'm in high school. There's a guy who's a senior who has a guitar, and we like the same bands. We always go to the same shows. Maybe he and I should start a band. And we did. And that was like my first time playing music with people. And then it was just on from there, and trying to play with as many people as I could. And then that translated into, just developing my chops as I went, which obviously, unbeknownst to me, I didn't know that Bruce would have this plan of having me fill in for my father. But then, I think there's a lot to be said. It's a, cliche that luck is preparedness meeting opportunity. But that's really what that kind of felt like, especially in the moment of like, I didn't know that this was going to happen, but I'm glad I've spent the last, 3 years of playing. That's all I was doing. I'd come home from school, I'd play drums, I'd make the flyers for my band's show that weekend, I'd, do all that sort of stuff. It was and remains everything to me, and yeah, that's I take much inspiration from the people who do, they surround themselves with their creative life. That's all they focus on. And that's yeah, I think a lot of us kind of find that maybe within those ages of like 13 to 14.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was probably easy for you to come home and be like, I'm gonna go play drums for a little while, Dad. Like he's gonna say no to you. Like it's already set up, it's ready to go.
Well, we joke now, like, I joke with him. I'm like, you're the one fucking person who could have talked me out of doing this. Like you were the one person who could have had the story. Like, no, you're not going to be a drummer. But no, I kid, of course. But like, no, it was one thing that, he was thrilled, just as thrilled as he was that I wanted to pick up, a goalie stick as a hockey player. He was just glad that his kid found something that resonated, in a true sense. And but then like I think definitely our relationship took a positive, spin once I started playing. Now we have this whole other thing that neither of us anticipated us relating on. Like of course we had like interests that we could relate on and stuff, but now, and especially now, like 20 years later, we have many parallels of our lives, our trajectories of music and being in bands and stuff. And like we can absolutely, even though I'm 40 years younger than my dad, we have many things that like we relate on in deeper ways than we probably ever would have otherwise. So it's like, in many ways, the selfish pursuit of becoming a musician and being a drummer and just following that, that passion is one thing, but the fact that it like ties into, it almost like reverse ties back into my family is very special. And just for example, they've been on tour for the last like 2.5 years, and their last show of this tour is coming up next week, and that just so happens to be right after my tour ends on this Metallica tour. So my wife and I are actually going to go catch the last show of this long E Street Band tour.
That's awesome.
In ways that we get to enjoy that and just like still, this many years later, enjoy what each other do creatively. He's my favorite drummer. They're my favorite band. I'd say like if like I'm always grappling, maybe say for like my favorite band, I think every other band is playing for second place because the E Street Band is always gonna be my favorite band, and that comes from a place that's like very deep within my my soul.
It's ingrained. It's ingrained in your DNA.
Yeah, for sure.
I gotta know though, did you think the songs were easy on drums?
I would never say that they're easy, because I think adjusting, and this has been something that's like popped up multiple times in my in my playing life, is that like something that may come across to maybe a first level listener as like easy could very surprisingly be like not easy at all, just because it's not blast beats at 1,000,000 miles an hour and double bass and stuff does not mean it's simple music. It comes from a specific time and place, and I think the complexity comes with like the knowledge of where this music comes from. And so I think it was a lot of studying. Like you could listen to a song and regurgitate it, but to really play the song, it's you have to understand the intent behind it, and the pacing of it. And that's a very important dynamic within Bruce's music, that for somebody who had only been playing drums for 3 years, that was the task. Like yeah, okay, so I'm playing polyrhythms and wild stuff with my band in high school, but to play Darkness on the Edge of Town the way Darkness on the Edge of Town is meant, complex. When they created that album, what year was that? 78. So my dad been 27. Pretty complex emotions for young, like young people of that age, in their late 20s, early 30s, whatever it was when they made that record. For a 17-year-old to then channel what that music is like, that's the challenge. How does 17 years old understand the like the heartbreak of like Bobby G, or whatever, and you have to channel that through the music. Like that's got to come through in some way. That's more difficult than playing, the four on the floor, or whatever, standard rock beats or something. It's more than that. So I learned that pretty quickly, that it's more than just playing these songs. It's more than just playing drum parts. It's playing music. That was one way that Bruce kind of put it to me. And Bruce never spoke necessarily in like direct musical terms. I think, the very base layer is like you have to know how to play the song. Like that was like something unspoken. You have to come to the table knowing how to play the music. It's another thing entirely to understand how to perform this and how to perform, 3.5 hour concerts or 4 hour concerts.
You're never out there an hour, right? You're always out there three and a half hours.
Yeah. I mean, the longest show I had played at that point was like a 30-minute punk set, like I hadn't done that before. So to embark on that experience was like, it took so much more than just knowing how to play, rock music, the Bruce's songs. Like there's a lot more to it. And I think, I don't think I've really thought about it explicitly like that, but I know that experience has also helped serve, where I've gone since then and making music since then, knowing like there's so much more intent and feeling and emotion behind the creation of this music than there might be as like a first level listener to it. And I think I've tried to take that lesson into making music since then, like understanding that many, many more influences than just what people might realize on the surface go into the creation of making a Slipknot record, and having done that 3 times, you understand the complexity and the depth that you need to reach. Even if we would often hang a Charles Mingus quote in the studio of like, it's very easy to take something simple and make it very complicated. It's very hard to take something complicated, a complicated emotion or feeling or a musical idea, and distill it to its simplest, most relatable qualities. And that's a paraphrasing and kind of my own take on what that quote meant, but it is true. Like, you have to figure out how to distill complex aspects of life and funnel them through art and through music. And so then when you're tasked with like, hey, I'm coming into this existing thing, it's so much more research and knowledge than just putting on the record, hearing it, and regurgitating that. Like I take it much, much more seriously. And like we said a couple times, like it's all about that, like that education process, being asked to play with Infectious Grooves and Suicidal Tendencies. I'd never been in a funk band before, and all of a sudden I'm like, I've now been asked to play with like probably one of the most well-known funk rock bands of that era, with the amazing Robert Trujillo, and like, geez, like now I got to figure out how to play funk music. And, and especially at the time I just had surgery. And so I was like kind of dealing with all these things, but I had to go on another, educational journey of like where this stuff comes from, what those guys were listening to when they were inspired, everything from Black Sabbath to Jaco Pastorius and, understanding where that all comes from. Same thing with Suicidal, which I kind of had more of a knowledge of, being into skate punk and stuff like that in an early age. Brooks being one of my favorite drummers, of all time. I got turned on to his drumming when he was in Bad Religion, and then kind of did my research backwards and learned about his drumming and Suicidal Tendencies. And hearing somebody who took the art form of the drums and applied, like a kind of like a high art way of drumming and applied that to skate punk rock, that was very exciting to me. And I think that was exciting to a lot of people. Like we heard, new interpretations of this, music, which happens today. Listen to Turnstile's new album, like that's nothing like anything that's been done. And finally somebody, cracked the code on making something totally new, totally inspired. And so those are all those things where I'm saying like, that educational process, like I'd say there are moments in my life where it's been more of like a deep dive into pursuing that education, pursuing the, the knowledge, and where did this come from, and how do I fit within it, and what's the, what's the passion and the energy and enthusiasm I can inject into this, this group or this music that we're making, whatever it is. That never really stops. It's just kind of seasons of more of that or less of that. It's just always like it's always kind of coming into life. But I think that's the same for anybody, for like really any discipline that's worth pursuing. I think everybody kind of feels that way.
Yeah, the turnstile thing, that's taking something that's complicated and making it simple for a lot of people to be into, and that's why they've kind of blown up in the last 5 years, right? They've tapped into that 100%, and so many more people are on board now because of it.
Yeah, well, and I think they're a tremendous band. I remember, one of my favorite shows I ever saw was Turnstile and Title Fight at a VFW hall in Britain.
Damn. Killer.
And to see their trajectory, and that it's the same passion, it's the same energy, and they've just refined and refined and refined what they've done to where now it's just this otherworldly thing that, like, I'm so glad for my friends that, like, the world is like I have so many friends bands that, like, I'm almost like upset that on like other bands' behalf, where I'm like, how is this band not like the biggest band in the world? Like, what is wrong with people not understanding that, like, band XYZ, like, man, you guys are so incredible, like, I know you're going to be the biggest thing. And so to feel so happy for my friends in Turnstile and watch their trajectory that comes from a purely earnest place, and they make art and music for the right reasons and with the right style and attitude. It's just like, I mean, it's a breath of fresh air, honestly, because it's so, I feel it's harder now more than ever, just from the nature of, like, everybody has a band. Everybody has a band that's trying to get in everybody's face at the same time. And we're all tripping all over each other. And, that's just the nature of what it's like being a musician in 2025. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just the way it is. But to see friends who are doing it for the right reasons connect with, like, an absolutely gargantuan, like, percentage of the earth is, like, so sick, and so, and not just the band themselves, but like the people around them who've been with them forever. Take Will Yip, who's recorded Turnstile.
Yeah,
they're still working with Will. I'm working with Will on some of my own stuff at the moment, and we reflect on, like, dude, fucking Turnstile is like, look at them, look at this, like, look at you guys, it's just it really is a beautiful thing, when that happens and you can just be around to, like, be a part of celebrating that. Like, how lucky are we? It's very, very cool. Almost kind of reminds me of, like, you mentioned Evil Empire, Rage Against the Machines. Like, how lucky were you that you got to be there for a part of that, like, zeitgeist moment? I never saw Black Flag. A lot of people never saw Black Flag. But, to be able to be like, man, I'm here and watching a band like Turnstile do it, like, fuck, man, how lucky are we? That's great. That's kind of how I look at it.
It's been fun to see their rise, and you actually have the unique perspective of coming from both ends of the world, right? You just said VFW Hall, Turnstile, and and then you play the biggest stages, because there are bands that I'm like, I've seen this hit, like, I know this other thing will hit, maybe even better and bigger, Yeah,
and look, there's no cheat code, there's no right way or time or whatever that anything works out or doesn't. Like, bands are crazy, and music and art is crazy, and there's no, fucking, Van Gogh was not understood in his time, and, like,
exactly.
And look now, so you never really know. It's just, music is just this thing that we do because it's in us. We put it out there, we push it as far as it'll allow us to do so, and really, the name of the game is just like, how can we keep doing it? I think that's a very important, like, even just moment that we're in as fans of music, how we behave with it, how we respect it, and how we respect artists to, like, keep being artists, because I think the landscape of being a music fan is such nowadays that, like, it's harder as a fan to feel like you're really supporting the artist that you love to then continue being the artist that you
So
love.
true.
You know, like it's just difficult. It's you know, it's the nature of, okay, we're all streaming using the same things. We're all, you know, figuring out how to, you know, get from one moment to the next, and we only have so much bandwidth to go to as many shows as we can or listen to as many new records. You know, I have like 30 new records like every week that I want to listen to, that I just don't
Yeah, can relate.
my bandwidth is just like you know, we all have lives, we all have stuff going on, and I want to pay attention to everything, but as a fanatic, you just try your best, you know, and really that's all we can do is like try to support artists the best we can in the ways that we know how. And there are those ways, you know, there are those ways of supporting, but it's a wild landscape out there, and I feel like it's more and more incumbent on us as fans, you know, and I think those of us who are in that kind of fan slash artist role, we kind of, I think we might understand it to a deeper sense of like, you know, showing up for the people who you want to show up for, and really like taking an active participation, because it takes active participation to be a fan and make sure that like this band, you know, gets their flowers that you really want them to see. That's why like it's so gratifying to see like, oh my God, Turnstile like getting the recognition that everybody wants them to have is beautiful. And I want that for every artist that I whose work I enjoy, because I want them to keep being the artists that they are. I want them to make more. Because I want to enjoy it more. But that's just like crazy, you know, it's the crazy environment that we're in, and it's infiltrated by fucking AI, and just like, you know, you have AI artists winning Grammys and stuff, and it's not to disparage that, but it's just like, dude, like that's not a frequency that I'm tuned into, is having something that's non-human.
It's soulless. It's absolutely soulless. Yeah.
Creating something that's meant for human. It's the human aspect of this, and we've all heard every take on that, but it's just like, what a crazy scenario that we're living in. We just got to do our part to support the real shit, you know, and that's up to us as the fans, you know.
We've talked about, Tony, like you know when you hear it, you know what I mean? And it is tough to dissect through the bullshit, because there's a lot of it.
There's so much
bullshit.
And
not even just in music, just with like social media content. I'm like, did that person really say that, or is it just an AI thing, you know?
Or something's cut out of context, or yeah.
So, you know, I'm hopeful that the pendulum, you know, swings back to reality somewhat. And in the meantime, you know, for me, it's like it doesn't adjust or affect anything that I'm interested to do at all. And I think anybody around me would say the same thing. You know, no band that I respect or love is interested in passing crazes like that. It's just kind of noise that exists, and we kind of observe it, and we can kind of just be like, wow, that's incredibly messed up stuff that's happening over there. I'm just going to keep focusing on my little painting right here. You know, like that's what we do and what we'll keep doing.
As you age, I mean, this is something that I've noticed. I'm going to be 41 here shortly, and as I've aged, I can see some of that stuff happening in the moment way more than I could when I was 20. Like, oh, this is my favorite thing ever. I'm 20. Like, it's been fed to me. I should love it. And then I get 2 years down the road, and I'm like, I mean, it's still cool. I'm happy it happened, but maybe that was a little more machine than man. You know what I mean? And now I see more of that, and I think that's kind of a good place to be as a fan. Is not necessarily skeptical, but just being like, the real stuff is going to last. You'll see the real stuff for what it is, especially as time passes. The fake stuff's not going to stick around.
For sure, yeah, and I think, you know, it's only natural that our tastes evolve and change, our pursuits change, and whatever as we go on in life, because life changes, you know, and that's perfectly fine. That's completely natural. I think I most look towards the artists who have, you know, at least for inspiration for myself, I look towards artists that never, you know, compromised who they were or their work or their intention throughout all those changes. Because, you know, fads come and go.
Well, you're certainly in a band that has not done that at all with Suicidal.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, so that's a, you know, a great example of a trajectory. Even with Suicidal, like Suicidal is very interesting to me in the ways of like the songs and the history of the band. Like the history of the band makes the songs like so malleable, because I often kind of describe Suicidal, like I was describing Suicidal to my wife when I joined, because she didn't know much about Suicidal, and I was like, it's like a community project almost, more so than like your stereotypical band. you know there are many people who, even within the last year, where it's like, okay, if one guy, can't make a show or whatever, hey, this guy who played with Suicidal back in, the 90s is going to come and do his thing. And that's a wild experience, to just have that many communal people who have different ways of approaching the music. And so, for instance, for myself, I'm a drummer coming into a band that has a history of Brooks Wackerman, Josh Freese, Eric Moore, Dave Lombardo, Thomas Pridgeon, all these guys. There are many I'm
insane
out, not intentionally, but it's up to then me to be like, how do I inject what I do? And I'm not gonna like, it's never ever been a thought my entire career of like, okay, coming into this band, I'm gonna act like, whoever's been in it before. It's like, much in the same way, like I mentioned how, Suicidal has been asked to be a part of this Metallica tour for the things that Suicidal brings. And that's not up for us to judge, but that's us to just come in and do our thing. In a more personal sense, that's always been how I've addressed like being asked to join a band, is like, okay, so for reasons that I'm not really able to define for myself, I've been asked to come in here and just do my best and bring my thing, whatever that means to this music. And so bringing that into Suicidal Tendencies, I find that there are, now we've been playing together for about a year. There are ways that I play the song subliminal that might be different from the ways that anybody else in the band played it. And the way they played it was different from anybody else that came before them. I really like that like malleability of the music in that way. But to go back to what I was saying, like, yeah, those artists, the say Converge, big inspiration for me. A band that's been active since like the early mid '90s and never broke up, and just kept doing their thing and refining and not pretty much not even acknowledging the outside creative world, just being very insular,
100%.
focused on the internal rather than the external, because the external is always going to change. There's always going to be changing landscapes of everything. So, and if you have an artistic vision that you believe in, the external doesn't need to infiltrate that. When it does, then you get sticky situations where you're making decisions based on things that are not entirely within the artistic experience. You're making a choice based on, this is what other people might like, or this is what is popular, or this is, we're getting pressured to blah 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 blah. Then the lines get blurred, and then you're not talking about art so much as you're talking about commerce and satisfying other people outside of that experience.
Exactly.
But if you're focused on the internal, if you're focused on what your group or you as yourself are doing creatively, then all that outside noise can just be noise. So the AI can float on by and it'll be its thing, and NFTs can be their thing, whatever. Just kind of block all that stuff out and do your own thing.
When you're joining, say, any band, doesn't, we don't have to name specifics here, but just generally speaking, you're bringing your flair, as you said. I would imagine it's not just you listening to the songs and learning them. It's probably playing with them either in a practice situation or live or both. How you end up interpreting how you're going to play songs. Like, it takes you a little bit of practice, a little bit of time to play off of other people too, especially being the backbone as the drummer.
Sure. And I mean, I think that's very much the same for, for anybody coming into a new, already established, thing. If you find, with respect, find your place within it. And I think that comes with like the basics of just, having the stuff down and being, being able to hang and just being able to fit within something that's exists for much longer than you've been a part of it. But yes, those things come. There are also then certain things that only come with time and practice and repetition and dedication. So like, I can show up, performing a song to the best of my ability on day one, but then over the course of a 30-day tour or something, I'm probably thinking deeper into that song on day 30 than I was able to on day one. And that's just from the nature of what it is, of repetition, of feeling vibes of people. And especially when you're in a situation where, you aren't just playing to a computerized, predetermined track, you're playing and listening to each other. You can find those nuances. I find those nuances, today. Like I was remarking to Dean the other day from Suicidal. I was just like, dude, join the army tonight. Like, wow, that I'm really feeling that, that groove,
Right
and
on.
this flow. I'm really feeling that place in that song now. Stuff like that only happens because you put yourself, in these paces, and through the sheer number of times you've played it, you improve. I think that's like something to be said for just, sticking to it, sticking to things over time, like the way you play a song over the course of 10 years certainly evolves, hopefully for the better. And you're not, as the drummer, you're one ingredient in that mix. Songs are living things. There's a likely a captured version of it. That's the recorded, static recording of it. But songs are living things. And I love watching bands, just even to mention Converge again. I saw them play a couple weeks ago, and there's a song from their 2009 album Axe to Fall called Worms Will Feed, Rats Will Feast, something like that. I might have it backwards, but they play that song quite a bit differently than it is on the record. And I've watched them over the course of 16 years since that record came out. I've watched all those evolutions of that song, and it's because they've found new voicings of it, new ways of like evolving this part that they didn't, when they first created it, but it's kept being a living thing. I view music kind of in that way, where, there's a respect that you pay to the original intent of what that recorded material is. But I think as you go forward, and especially, as you change personnel, and if you get a new person involved, then that aspect of things alters, just naturally. So I think it's a fine line to ride, maybe, and you try to ride that whole thing, like I said, like with respect, but also, especially as it relates to like the music that I make, that we all kind of love. It's like, yes, there's respect, but also there's intensity, and there has to be intensity. So you have to be deliberate, and you have to be focused on, in your respect for what was. You can't betray the current moment of like what you're tasked with. And it's like, okay, I'm not gonna play this song at 99%. I need to play this song at 100%. And that's gonna, for whatever that means, that's going to be a true representation of what this is, respecting the music by playing the way this music is being played in the present moment. And I find that's where you get magic to happen. It doesn't happen every night, but that, in my experience, that's always been like the truest form of like, having an understanding where the music comes from and where it exists in this moment right now. That's like the best way I can kind of put it in words.
I was smirking when you were talking, because it took me, to be honest with you, probably 25 years as a music fan to not only appreciate that, but get behind it. Because you're right, there is a fine line. Some bands they cross the bridge and re-record stuff, and generally it's not as good, right? But then there's bands that take liberties live, and 20-year-old me would have been like, come on,
this isn't what I
that's not the original.
Yeah.
That's not what I signed up for. That's not how I remember it. But now I'm like, no, this is the moment. Like, all this time has passed. Like, they're in a different space. You're right. It could be different personnel. It's crazy. Like, I'm at the point now where it's like, mix it up. I'm in,
Yeah. One great example of that is the band Clutch, one of my favorite bands of all time.
Same.
Tone, do you know them, Tone?
Huge fan, yep.
Yeah. So Jean-Paul Gaster, one of my favorite drummers ever. He's like a mentor to me in ways. We see each other probably once every couple of years at this point, but we have great conversations whenever we see each other, and I'm such a huge fan. I actually just missed them. They just played in a cavern outside of Nashville like a couple of days.
Yeah. They're doing the funky venue tour. Yep.
Yeah. But so I missed him, but he had a really interesting approach for one thing that they did. where arguably their biggest song, one of their biggest songs, Electric Worry, from an album they put out in like 2005, I think, is based around a shuffle. Dun, ba-bum, 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 like that. And he recorded it on that record, the original recording of that song. He was doing that shuffle, pretty much shuffling only on the ride with the backbeat on the snare, like that. And he's done interviews since because they, I think during COVID and stuff, they went and did a bunch of recordings. And I think during that, they re-recorded Electric Worry because he had been educating himself. Here we go again, more about, staying educated. He had been educating himself, I think maybe on like the origins of the shuffle and what a like quote true shuffle should be, and that it incorporates the snare in that shuffle along with the ride played simultaneously. So instead of just a solid backbeat, like, you're on the ride like that, you're incorporating the ride. It's simultaneous. It's almost like it's like a swing shuffle version of like a blast beat. That's kind of like, it's a version of a blast beat, basically.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
I've never heard anyone say that in my life.
Basically that. And so he had, from what I understand from what he said, he's like, I wanted to re-record that song, arguably their biggest song, and re-record that with the true intent of the shuffle. So like go and listen to, the 2005 version of Electric Worry and the like 2020 or 2021 version, whatever it is, of Electric Worry, and you'll hear that difference in the drum beat was, I think, the inspiration for them re-recording that song, and that's how he plays it live. I was just watching a video from him from the other night. I'm like, wow, look at him go with that shuffle. It's so tight. So I find that very interesting where, a band that's, talk about a band that's inspiration of being a band, Clutch are, I think everybody should look to them as inspiration of how to conduct yourselves as a band, Same four guys since 1980, whatever, doing inspired music, doing it on their own terms, releasing it themselves, having heavy hands and all the artwork, all the everything. Each of them is complete democratic process where they each take a turn writing the set list every night. They rotate who makes the set list that they're going to play. I find that band completely fascinating and totally inspirational because they work at it. I appreciate the work ethic. And to know that somebody like Jean Paul is not going to be concerned, like, I'm going to take one of our most, one of our fan favorite songs, and we're going to re-record it. Like, that'd be sacrilege for most bands to embark on an endeavor like that. Right. And the fact that they're so gutsy. I mean, I remember playing a show with Clutch where they only played material from their new record, and it was amazing. And I told them after that, I was like, you guys just realized you just played a show where you didn't play anything but new songs off of your record. And they're like, oh yeah, I didn't really realize that. I was like, that is so incredibly badass that you have that much faith in what you're doing 30, whatever, something years, 20, whatever it is, however many years into being a band you've been, and you're that confident in what you're doing today. That's incredibly inspirational. And the fact that they're willing to take a risk, like re-recording one of their most fan favorite songs and just doing it because it's like, this is the artistic integrity and our artistic intent of what we're doing. I wanted to do it this way, and now I've learned to do it, so we're doing it. And I find that totally inspirational. That's very, very cool.
That's an awesome story. I didn't know that's why that was re-recorded. So now I'll have different set of ears on when I listen to it.
Yeah, I feel like I'm not speaking out of turn. I think I read something that Jean Paul had said that he had been working on his shuffle, and that's what inspired that. So yeah, very, very cool. I hope that's true. I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but I'm pretty sure it's true. Check it out. Listen to it and tell me if I'm wrong.
All right, I will do. I'll shoot you an email. Yeah, that's awesome. I love that band. That's a band that I end up on their website every couple of months just to buy a new T-shirt or a hat or a sweatshirt. I just love that band. They're so good.
Yeah, they're like our generation's Led Zeppelin or something like that. Like, gosh, what an incredible band, and just like unbelievable players at everything they do.
All right, we've had you for a solid hour and 15 here, Jay. But let's talk about what you've got coming up.
Yeah. So at the moment, we're wrapping up this tour with Metallica, Suicidal Tendencies, with Pantera Metallica. That's been incredible. And we are going to link back up with Metallica in November in Australia, New Zealand, which will be incredible. Suicidal, Evanescence, and Metallica. That'll be awesome. a couple shows here and there in the States and stuff. We're playing with one with Cypress Hill, one with Slayer. Very eclectic, I love that. That's some of my favorite part about
Love that.
being in like a heavy band, that still can like also play nice with other, other themed kind of, music or whatever. Like playing with Cypress is just so sick. I did a tour with them a couple years ago and they're amazing. And aside from that, like a lot of what I'm working on, I'm my good friends in an Australian band called Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. Absolutely unbelievable band. They were very, very kind in asking me to perform at their festival coming up in Colorado. They're putting on a 3-day festival in Colorado called Field of Vision, and they hit me up just because they're the sweetest people ever. They're like, "Hey, dude, like you gotta play Field of Vision, like do something." And me, I'm just like, "Oh, absolutely, like I'd love to." And
I'll figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and like, also in the back of my head, kind of thinking like, well, like, I do my drum clinics, which are a lot of fun, and it's a way where I've kind of like, even a little bit lately, I've been doing them, and I have a couple more of those coming up. I have one that I'm doing in Nashville in the middle of July, where it's like kind of I've taken it as kind of like a look back the last 15 years, like the music we've been talking about. A lot of people I think ask me like, you know, from Springsteen to Suicidal and Slipknot and all this stuff in between. Like, what the fuck? Like, what is your
what
deal?
Are you doing? What?
Like, how does all this stuff make sense? And the drum clinics are a way where I'm able to sort of make all that stuff make sense and make one performance that sort of taps on all of these things that I've done over the last 15 or 20 years. And that's a lot of fun. But I also was thinking when Gizzard invited me to do this, I was like, that's not the right place for that. Like I'm, it'd be weird for me to like show up at a fest and like, I don't know, just me on drums playing this stuff. I don't think it would make entirely that much sense. So I think even if I'm being honest, I was like kind of hoping that they'd have forgot that they asked me. But then they were like, okay, like, dude, like, what do you got to do? We gotta announce that you're doing something. I'm like, oh, fuck. Okay. And I was like, okay, I've always wanted to do this thing with a friend of mine that I met. It was one of the first people I met in Nashville. His name is Connor Sullivan, and his stage name, he goes by Argus. And he's a noise artist who does wild modular synthesizer stuff that's just totally impressive and wild. And we've always told each other, like, dude, we got to do something, like some, hybrid of drums and electronics and crazy stuff. We're very much inspired by artists that do that sort of thing, and we kind of want to take a stab at doing it ourselves. So I told the Giz people, I was like, hey, like, what about this as an idea? Like, this is my buddy, and we'll collaborate on doing stuff that's like a hybrid of his stuff, a hybrid of my stuff, and bring it in and just like throw it all together. And so that's what we'll be doing. Wow. So that takes place in the middle of August, and it'll be, I mean, we're basically like starting a new band and doing that with the invitation to the festival being like, there's nothing like a deadline to whip stuff into shit.
Yeah.
So that's incredibly exciting. And I've been working on that as I've been, home in between legs of this Metallica tour. And I have most of July where I'll be pretty much focused on that. But that's awesome. And I love the Gizzard guys and the whole family they have around them, and their audience is so, I've been very fortunate to get up on stage and play a couple songs with them last year, and their audience has just been so welcoming and kind and incredible that it's like whatever like proximity I can have to that world is super cool. So I'll be doing that, and also working on I've been working on a, like, lack of a better way of putting it, like a solo album, but it's certainly not solo, in the terms of like, it's not just me. I'm playing all the instruments on it, and I'm collaborating with many different vocalists who I've been inspired.
Ooh, I love this.
Yeah,
I'm
inspired by.
always,
Thanks. Yeah, I've always wanted to do something like this, where like with my friend Connor at Argus, there are many people in life that we always meet. And it's like, dude, you're so rad. Like, let's start a side project or something like that. And it's very, it's difficult. We all have lives. We all have our main things that we do, and life takes us in directions, and it's hard to focus and embark on like, hey, let's make a record, let's start a band, let's do whatever. But I think it's more easily manageable if I were to, if I write a song and I've come up with it, I'm like, man, vocally this direction, it could be really great with this guy, this girl, on it, who's a friend of mine that I've always wanted to work with. And I kind of pitch it to them like, hey, here's this thing. What would you think vocally and lyrically and stuff? Like, I think this is up your alley. What do you think? So I've been working on something this entire year that I'm really, really excited about. So Field of Vision will be kind of like the debut of some of that material. In a little way, it'll be kind of filtered more through the collaboration I'm doing with Argus for it. But yeah, that's been a huge undertaking that I'm really excited about. Hopefully getting out there starting in the fall or so. I made kind of a deal with myself that like, this is material that I've been writing and rearranging and working on for years. Like, I was unable to do anything with it. But now that I have the freedom and the ability to exercise all this stuff, it's been an incredible creative endeavor to, I'm teaching myself how to be a recorded guitar player and bass player and, keyboard player and all this. And I really appreciate how it's also kind of like, as I've written this stuff, I've been writing this material since like I have like a demo of one of these songs that dates back to like 2011, and I've always found working on, guitars, like I'm surrounded by the guitars I play with, that helps reinforce or reinform how I approach the drums, and I'm listening to what I'm making, not just from wearing my drummer's hat and like, oh, just make the drums louder. That would be awesome. It's not just that.
Right. Yeah.
It's I'm listening to this because I have such a heavy hand in all of it. Myself, the guitar player, has to respect myself as the drummer, and vice versa. And as the painter who's going to be doing the artwork and stuff like that. That's all undertakings that I'm taking on. So it's slow goings, but I'm very proud of it, and I'm hoping that some of that stuff starts to see the light of day. Hopefully this fall is kind of like the deal that I've made with myself. So we'll see. Knock on wood. We'll see what happens.
There's that deadline again, right? Get you moving, right?
I do work well when I have a deadline imposed on me. I find I'm not alone in that. I think I know a lot of my friends and peers. We work well when it's like it's got to be done by this day, or else we're gonna keep moving the goalposts and it'll never be done. And the best work is always just abandoned. It's never really finished. So that's kind of where I'm at now. But I'm very excited about it.
That's very exciting as a fan on our end too. So we're stoked to hear how that ends up turning out, man.
Thank you. Yeah, it's sonically, it's all stuff that I've always wanted to dive into. It I think my influences from Neurosis and Interpol and My Bloody Valentine show their face in this kind of material more so than it has in other music that I've been a part of writing or recording in the past. So I'm very thrilled to get this stuff out for sure.
It's funny, Jay. Earlier today, I was looking through your Instagram and I was like, geez, I'd love to be a fly on the wall in some of those conversations. And maybe I'm reading too much into it, but it looked like there were maybe some studio photos. So I don't know. We're excited for it. I guess that's the punchline.
Yeah, there's definitely been some. I forgot to even mention that. I mean, that's not necessarily something I can talk about specifically yet. But having just made a record with a producer and engineer I've always wanted to work with a band that I'm so excited about. There could be potential for doing some touring under that. We'll see. But yeah, it was an incredible experience. Very fast paced. It was just like 6 days and kind of in and out. Like, wow, I've never made a record this quickly. But recording 11 songs in 3 days was like a gnarly thing, and to do it in between legs of a tour was quite an endeavor. But like it's just one of those things. It's like I get an invitation to do something that's enticing, and it's like, hey, I'm over here making a cool record with someone you've always wanted to record with. You want to do that? I'm like, I don't have it within me to say no. I just don't. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm very excited.
Jay Weinberg has no off switch.
Yeah, I love it. I was gonna say
my wife would agree that
yeah,
hard. Well, look, we should only all be so lucky to have outlets of creativity and people to collaborate with. So I just try to make the most of it day by day.
So yeah, we appreciate you giving us plenty of time today. This is amazing for someone who's as busy as you are doing all the things you're doing, man. This has been a blast to chat with you for an hour and a half.
It's a pleasure, man. Well, hey, connecting with friendly folks such as yourselves, that's the other part of this equation. Otherwise we'd be making a whole lot of racket just by ourselves. So the fact that we share it and discuss it with you guys is that's the other half of this equation that's very important. So thank you guys for having me.
Jay, that's the mic drop on this episode. Thank you so much. You literally could do anything in the world right now, and you're with us, so we appreciate it.
My pleasure. Likewise. All right, you guys be good. Enjoy Amsterdam, and yeah, we'll touch base when this all comes out.
Oh yeah.
Sweet. Thanks, Jay.
Thank you for listening to Patio Slave. We are at Patio Slave on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all of the places that you can find us on social media. Facebook, Patio Slave Podcast. YouTube, Patio Slave Podcast there. Email us at patioslavepodcast@gmail.com. And hey, if you want to become a supporter, click on the link at the bottom of the episode and give us $1, give us $5. It keeps the lights on, keeps us going. We really appreciate that stuff. Thank you.